Hi, I'd like to talk to you about the optimal user fee, especially in the case of a natural monopoly. What we're going to do on this graph is we're going to draw a natural monopoly. Natural monopoly is when it's cheaper for one firm to produce a product than it is for more than one firm. This would be a case of economies of scale given the size of our demand curve. Various markets have been used as examples of natural monopolies, including hospitals, where you could have a hospital with very high fixed costs, and as if we have a lot of patients in that hospital, the average cost of caring for each patient is lower than if you have fewer patients in the hospital, because most of the costs are fixed and don't change with the number of patients. Likewise, you can think of an airplane, where if we can fill the airplane, it's lower average cost than if we just have a few passengers on the airplane, because the airplane flies, it's a lower cost. Normally, the airlines aren't necessarily considered natural monopolies, but obviously that case would be an example of that. Big case is utilities, water company. If we have just one water company, we don't have all this duplication of water lines going around each other. Electric company, if we just have one electric company, they can provide the product more cheaply. AT&T for telephones for years argued we are a natural monopoly. If you let us do it, we can do it cheaper. Roads. A lot of times roads are provided by government, saying, if you just have the state provide the roads, they can provide it at a lower average cost than having a lot of different road producers. And so various different ways of providing the product. Okay, now that we've got natural monopoly down with those large economies of scale, let's draw the curves for a natural monopoly. We have to have a downward sloping average cost curve. So I am going to, for simplicity, assume we have a constant marginal cost curve. And let's see if I can draw a horizontal line that's perfectly straight. So I'm going to start right. Let's start that over again. Let's try it again. That looks perfect, except for the dome in the middle, but we'll say that works. So quantity, price. I used my little 6-inch ruler on these other ones, which is why they're straighter. Now trying to get my ruler on this little plastic sheet to fit doesn't always work the best. So there's my marginal cost. My average cost is going to be falling. There's my average cost. And average cost is equal to total cost divided by quantity. And my marginal cost is a change in total cost over change in quantity. Our efficient rule is we want to price where price is equal to marginal cost. But let's draw a demand curve and marginal revenue curve first. Oops, I want to change my colors. And so let's assume this is my demand curve. So D for demand. I'll write it out. Twice the slope. There's my marginal revenue. If I'm trying to maximize profits, what we'd normally expect, let's draw a little bit better marginal revenue curve. So I'll come down here. Marginal revenue. Does that look better? Yeah, it's not perfect, but we'll say it. I'm trying to make it so it's about twice the slope there. So marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost is where we set the output to maximize profits. So I'm going to put market or monopoly at QM. Go up to the demand curve. It's like right about there, doesn't it? That would be my price, my monopoly price. I'll put PM up there. Okay, so my lines aren't perfect, but hopefully you get the point. So set the marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost. That gives me my quantity up to the demand curve over. That will be my monopoly or market price. Now that's not efficient. Let's put red for efficient. So efficient says we want to produce right here. So efficient is where price is equal to marginal cost. Well, price is equal to marginal cost right there. QE for efficient. Price for efficient is right over here. So PE over here. right here, is going to be efficient. However, there's a problem, as we mentioned. Price times quantity is total revenue. And average cost times quantity, if I multiply both sides of this by quantity, those quantities drop out. Average cost times quantity is my total cost. Notice my total cost in this efficient solution, so average cost is going to be up there. So if average cost times quantity is total cost, price times quantity is total revenue, this area right here, this area right there, is going to be a loss. If it's a private firm, it's going to go out of business. If it's a public firm, it's going to be losing money every time that will have to be subsidized from other tax revenue or some other fees. Now, the argument would be that if the benefits received principle is the people who are buying whatever this is, whether it's a water company or something else, should pay the fees that generate this average cost. So they are covered. But regardless, you can't just charge PE and cover all the costs. There's going to be a loss. Just so I don't have as many lines in there, I'm going to take those points out just to make it a little clearer. So efficiency creates a problem. Well, one argument is, why don't we just set price equal to average cost? Well, if we did that, let's put it in blue. If we knew exactly where the average cost curve was and exactly where the demand curve was, which for most utilities is probably not true. Trying to find exact position of the demand curve would be very difficult. You could use econometrics, but I don't think it's going to give you exactly that point. But this would be our average cost pricing, quantity at average cost. So this would be my average cost over here, and if I set my price is equal to that, notice if I took price times this price times this quantity, it's going to be total revenue. Average cost times quantity we just talked about is total cost. In this case, my whenever price is equal to average cost, total revenue is equal to total cost. In other words, it's a zero economic profit. They're not losing any money. And in this case, they're covering just a normal accounting profit. So if it's AT&T, they just have enough to give a dividend to their customers or to their stockholders. If it's a private company, they're covering the costs of production, and or rather a public company, so they don't have any extra costs. So in this case, and I'm going to erase those quantities up here just to make it look a little better. So let's get rid of those two, but so hopefully it's clear. Whenever price is equal to average cost, it's a profit. When price is below average cost, it's a loss. And firms have an incentive to get out of business. When price is greater than average cost, like it is way up here, there's incentive for other firms to enter. But in natural monopoly, the argument is, well, keep the other firms out, so it's still cheaper to produce. And then, so normally they'll try to have, or many public firms will try to have prices equal to average cost and have a regulation that way. A couple of problems, though, is if we do set the price equal to average cost. Notice, in this case, if average costs go up, well, then do the prices go up? Or if the company innovates and average cost goes down, they can save costs, they don't get to keep it. So they don't have as much incentive to innovate, and they don't have much incentive to keep their costs down. In fact, I remember talking to an AT&T executive who had retired some years before I had talked to him, and I asked him, well, is this true that AT&T do not have much incentive to keep costs down or to innovate? And he said, no, yeah, it is true that their costs were covered, and so often they took years to put in the new innovations that they had even developed with their Bell Labs, which was an incredible invention incubator. So that creates kind of a problem on terms of creating an optimal user fee. Are you giving incentive for this company to in a sense, be mismanaged? But we also have another case is that this fee that's above marginal cost is like an optimal tax, or questioning about it's as if it's a tax, not necessarily even optimal tax. And so some people have argued, why not use a Ramsey solution, which is the way of having an optimal tax. And the Ramsey solution is government has to raise a certain amount of revenue. They need to break even, which is where we talked about average cost. And in this case, Ramsey rule says set the user fee so that the demands for each of the companies or commodities are reduced proportionately. And so that's another way of doing it. It adds another complexity to the issue. And but it also shows that we can use optimal tax rules also in this case, but also shows some of the complexity of setting optimal user fees. And if you just cover their costs, it could also have some other problems in terms of, for example, when AT&T was deregulated. In this diagram, if they're deregulated and they can start charging the regular monopoly prices, prices should have gone up. We had average cost pricing, competition might even raise prices. In this case, because their costs were so high, I would argue that a lot of their prices just plummeted, especially on long distance pricing. Now, of course, you could answer that and say they had an incentive to have higher prices on long distance to subsidize your local, but there's also other things like they didn't have much incentive to keep their costs down. So we've got a bunch of things going on here. So hopefully it was pretty clear on natural monopoly. First key, efficient is where price is equal to marginal cost, but that creates a loss. So let's have average cost pricing where we can break even, but that gives a disincentive to keep costs down or to innovate. So we have a problem that way. But we need to, often there are many cases where we could argue it's a natural monopoly. The other way is just let natural competition over the long run keep the prices down, but that's only if it's a private company, not if it's provided for by tax revenue. So some other issues there. Thank you.